On July 9th, 2018, President Trump nominated Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. Okay, you remember that, right? 3 weeks later, a woman named Christine Blasey Ford wrote a letter to Senator Dianne Feinstein of California saying that Kavanaugh had molested her, attacked her, done something when they were teenagers. Okay? 2 months after that, the story broke. All right? And Ford ran around saying, Kavanaugh did X, Y, and Z to me, and he shouldn't be confirmed. Okay. Now, I followed that story very closely, and you heard about it. And the thing I couldn't understand about the story was she didn't know when it happened, Blasey Ford. People at the parties that she was referring to said, no, it didn't happen. Didn't know who drove her home, didn't know anything. It's like, what's her name in New York testifying against Trump? She didn't even know what year it happened. Okay, when I see that, I get a little, I don't know about this. All right, and there was nobody corroborating Blasey Ford's story. Her girlfriends didn't corroborate, nobody corroborated. Okay, so she writes a book, and it's out now, Blasey Ford. It's a bomb. It's a book's a bomb. All right, it's on Amazon Kindle. It's rated 9,000. On Barnes & Noble, it's 7,000. Nobody's buying this stupid book because nobody believes her. The other thing is that Blasey Ford is a abortion zealot. Loves abortion. And I'm going, oh, yeah. So I'm putting the whole thing together, and I was extremely skeptical. Now, one of the people named in this, oh, by the way, Blasey Ford appeared on CBS Sunday Morning, all cupcake interviews. The View, NPR, all of that. Cupcake, cupcake, cupcake. She didn't get the massive nighttime exposure I thought she might get, but, you know, still time. But a book, nobody's buying it. Good. One of the names mentioned in this whole thing was Mark Judge, who was a friend of Brett Kavanaugh. So I wanted to talk to him. But Mr. Judge is a very cautious man. He should be. He went through a lot when this broke. So instead of putting him on television, we've got him on a telephone from his home state. I'm not even going to tell you where he is. He's a journalist. As I say, he knew Brett Kavanaugh. He got pulled into this as somebody who did something. I don't quite know. Judge wrote a book called The Devil's Triangle, Mark Judge versus the New American Stasi. Stasi is the East German secret police when they were communists. Mark, you on the phone? You hear me okay?
I hear you, Bill. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. All right. So when Blasey Ford put her book out, I'm sure you haven't read it. I haven't read it. I mean, I know what her rap is. How would you describe that woman?
I'm not sure how I would describe her. I tend to stick to the facts, being a journalist. And a lawyer friend of mine who stayed up all night reading her book had a very interesting takeaway. He called me the next day. He said, Mark, I stayed up all night reading this thing. You are only quoted via official government transcripts and congressional records, which is quite telling because it means that they don't want to get sued. Now, the second thing is that my book, The Devil's Triangle, came out 2 years ago. I cite chapter and verse of little and big things I found that were mysterious and concerning. I'll give you one. In her letter to Feinstein saying that I was a witness to Brett Kavanaugh attacking her, I am referred to as Mark G. Judge. That's an old journalism byline I used when I was younger. Nobody calls me Mark G. Judge anymore. It indicated to me that maybe they were researching me, that maybe this wasn't an organic thing. The day after Brett was nominated, she was meeting with Emma Brown, the reporter at the Washington Post who ultimately broke the story. The next day, Emma Brown emails me, a very innocent, innocuous email. Hey, I'm doing a story about Georgetown Prep and you and Brett Kavanaugh. Nothing about Blasey Ford. Number three, I'll be quick. This is the last thing I'll say on this. Number three, Leland Kaiser, Blasey Ford's friend, who denied the whole thing, who Blasey Ford said was at this party and who, like me, was traumatized by this thing, was interviewed by Emma Brown of the Washington Post in Leland Kaiser's house the week before the Blasey story broke. Emma Brown at the Washington Post left Leland Kaiser out of her story. I have an email from Emma Brown saying, do you know Leland Kaiser? You know, and this is before the story broke. And to keep it simple, I don't want to confuse people, but then the story breaks, and Leland Kaiser is not in this earth-shattering story. And for 2 years, I've been asking, okay, why did you call me Mark G. Judge? I have evidence that indicates you were using an Oppo researcher on me all summer. Why was Leland Kaiser left out of this story when she was denying the whole thing?
He wouldn't back up what Emma, what's her name, wanted. That's why.
Right.
That's what they all do.
Right.
They weren't looking for the truth. I mean, come on. I mean, you know that. Everybody knows that. They're looking to convict Kavanaugh on whatever they convict him. This is the press. Now, what a disturbing aspect of this story is the FBI exonerated Kavanaugh, that they didn't find anything after their investigation. Remember that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. But they never.
I talked to him for 3 hours.
All right. So you were involved with that. So, but they never put out.
I talked to the FBI for 3 hours.
They never put out a public report on it. And they should have. I would have liked to have seen, they could redact names if they wanted to, but how they arrived at their conclusion that Brett Kavanaugh was not guilty. I think the people deserve that. When the FBI talked to you, Mark, what did you tell them in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, I told them that I just have no recollection of this at all. I mean, I'm Catholic. I have a good conscience. I've been sober for 30 years. I said the Supreme Court is not important enough to me to lie about something like sexual assault. Hand to God, standing before Jesus, had I seen this, I simply would say so. The truth is so much easier just to say so. I simply don't recall this. That's what I told them. And here's an interesting point. They said this is either going to take 3 hours or 7 hours. And I thought, well, that's quite a disparity. And I later understood that if you're lying, it takes 7 hours because they got to keep drilling down on you. And if you're telling the truth, it's less time, which is 3 hours. And mine
obviously, they believed your story. But when you say you don't recall it, any human being witnessing something like that would recall it, right?
I think they will. Do you know how I learned of this story? Ronan Farrow called me. I'm sitting at home taking care of my elderly mother in September 2018. I get a call from Ronan Farrow, and literally he says this. He says, you're implicated in this letter about sexual misconduct. It was sexual misconduct at the time involving Brett Kavanaugh, who's been nominated. And I, hand to God, Bill, I said, well, who's the accuser? He said, I can't tell you that. I said, where did this allegedly take place? He said, I can't tell you that. I said, when did this allegedly take place? He said, sometime in the 1980s. I mean, that's why I refer to the Stasi. I mean, that's literally what happened.
And you guys were teenagers. You were in high school. You were prep school guys. All right, final question, though. But my point of the matter is this. No matter if you're older than 10 years old, all right, if you're north of that, and you see some kind of horrific conflict in a physical way like that, you remember that. It's not like, well, I don't recall. I don't recall, filling up my car with gas. But something like that stays with you. So I took, and you correct me if I'm wrong, your words to say it did not happen. Am I wrong to feel that way?
Bill, there's a couple things real quick. One, it's much more sinister than you understand. There was extortion and witness tampering and opposition research. It's all in my book, The Devil's Triangle. And number two, we grew up in a tight-knit Irish Catholic school community. If a boyfriend and girlfriend had an argument, it ricocheted gossip-wise around the community within hours. If somebody went to a party and this happened and couldn't remember anything, how they got there, how they got back, if something like this happened, everybody would have been talking about it. And Leland Kaiser, her friend who allegedly was there, would have known about it. Like, people in the community would have known about this.
Sure, and that's all obvious. So I'm going to take it again that you believe it did not happen with Brett Kavanaugh. Okay?
Yes, at this point, I believe it didn't happen. And
I
they were
don't know
trying
what
to
other
extort
point
us.
there could
That's
be,
the point.
Mark. You keep throwing in those words.
Yeah.
So I'm taking it that it didn't happen. But I'm going to give you 5 seconds to correct me if I'm wrong, because I always want to be honest.
No, I think it didn't happen, and I think it was an extortion plot, and I think it was a witness tampering plot. And I think they found me as a weak link, as a former drinker, and they tried to use me. I think that's what happened.
All right, Mark. We appreciate your time very much. Thank you.